When Jessica Bowes-Monero walked off the court in Beijing after her second-round loss to Mira Andreeva, she didn't just leave disappointed, she left furious. In a post-match interview that spread quickly across social media, the Spanish player claimed the officiating wasn't just sloppy, but potentially compromised, and she demanded answers. This wasn't the kind of complaint about a single close call that tennis fans are used to. Bowes-Monero pointed to multiple decisions that, in her view, shaped the outcome of the match and cost her valuable ranking points, prize money, and momentum during what has been the best season of her career. The official record says Mira Andreeva won 6-4, 7-5, but those numbers only scratch the surface of what unfolded on Court 1 at the China Open. The contest lasted 2 hours and 18 minutes, and in that span at least 7 line calls were challenged, with 5 overturned in Bowes-Monero's favor. 2 overrules by the chair umpire became the main talking points rather than the quality of tennis. What should have been a showcase between an emerging Spaniard-ranked number, 54, and a teenage prodigy-ranked number, 23 became a debate about whether the WTA's officiating system can be trusted at its most prestigious events outside the Grand Slams. The first big dispute came at 3-3 in the opening set. Serving at 30-15, Bowes-Monero hit a first serve that clipped the outer edge of the service box. The line judge called it out. She immediately challenged. Beijing, like other WTA 1000 events, uses Hawkeye replay technology on its main courts, and the replay showed the ball had caught the line by 2 millimeters. The challenge should have been successful, but the chair umpire, Liu Wei, had already verbally confirmed the out call before the replay appeared. By rule, once the umpire asserts authority, they can override the challenge. Liu chose to stand by his original confirmation, replaying the point as a second serve. Bowes-Monero lost the rally and then dropped her serve to trail 3-4. The decision infuriated her because the system in use, human line judges backed by Hawkeye challenges, was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. Studies by the International Tennis Federation estimate human judges miss close calls around 8 to 12% of the time. In 2024, WTA players challenged more than 4,200 calls at 1,000-level events, and about one-third were overturned. In this match alone, Bowes-Monero's challenge success rate was 71%, far above the average. Statistically, that points to something unusual about the officiating quality on her court that day. Another flashpoint arrived late in the second set. With Andreeva serving at 4-4, the score sat at 30-30. Bowes-Monero ripped a passing shot down the line that was called good by the baseline judge. Andreeva challenged. Hawkeye showed the ball out by 7 millimeters. Andreeva kept the point, went on to hold serve, and then broke Bowes-Monero in the following game to seal the victory. Bowes-Monero protested, insisting she had seen dust rise from the baseline where her ball landed. But because the match was on hard court, not clay, there was no option for the umpire to inspect a mark. Hawkeye stood as the final authority. Technically, the replay was correct. 7 millimeters is outside Hawkeye's 3 millimeter margin of error. Yet the closeness of the call, coupled with the earlier disputes, left Bowes-Monero unconvinced. She lingered at the baseline for nearly 90 seconds, gesturing angrily before play resumed. By then, her focus was gone, and Andreeva closed it out 7-5. Afterward, Bowes-Monero didn't hold back. She told reporters, "I don't understand how technology can prove I was right 5 times, and yet I still lose the most important points because the umpire decides otherwise. At this level, I expect fairness. If the WTA cares about fairness, they need to investigate what happened today because something was not right." Her phrase in Spanish, "algo no estaba bien," implied more than simple human error. Asked whether she was accusing bias, she declined to say yes or no, but repeated that an independent review was necessary. The clip of her comments has now been seen more than 2 million times across platforms, with reactions sharply divided. A majority of Spanish outlets defended her stance, while Russian media mocked her for undermining Andreeva's achievement. Online fan communities fractured along predictable lines, some calling her brave for speaking up, others branding her a sore loser. For Andreeva, the controversy was unwanted baggage. Her numbers in the match backed up the win, 26 winners to Bowes-Monero's 19, 4 breaks of serve to 2, and superior performance on second serve points. Statistically, she was the better player. But instead of headlines celebrating another step forward in her young career, she left Beijing fielding questions about whether her victory had been tainted by poor officiating. The fallout from Beijing quickly grew beyond the match itself. Social media amplified every word from Buses Monero's press conference. Her frustration over something not right was clipped and replayed across tennis feeds, fueling speculation far beyond the usual match recap cycle. Fans dissected the disputed calls frame by frame, slowing replays, circling lines, and debating whether Hawkeye was precise enough to be trusted. The numbers alone tell a worrying story. Across the 2024 season at WTA 1000 events, the average player wins about 2 challenges per match. Buses Monero won 5. The odds of an officiating crew producing such an outlier performance simply through bad luck are slim. Statistically, the chance of hitting a 71% challenge success rate in 7 attempts, when the long-term average is 31%, is below 4%. It doesn't prove bias, but it suggests an officiating standard well below what's expected at this level. The WTA's official response did little to calm the storm. 48 hours after the match, the tour released a statement. The WTA is committed to the highest standards of officiating at all our events. We review all matches where officiating questions are raised and will address any concerns through appropriate channels. The same template has been issued at least a dozen times in recent years whenever controversy has flared. Rarely do such reviews result in public findings. Most end quietly, with the chair umpire or line judges given private feedback and reassigned without fanfare. That lack of transparency frustrates players and fans alike. Other sports have begun publishing officiating reviews or even releasing referee audio to rebuild trust. Tennis, by contrast, shields its decision-making process from public view. The result is a vacuum filled by rumor, speculation, and fan theories. For Buses Monero, the stakes are especially high because of her ranking position. Entering Beijing at number 54, she needed every ranking point she could get. A third-round appearance would have given her 120 more points, pushing her to around number 47. That might seem like a small jump, but crossing into the top 50 can determine whether a player is seeded at major events. Seeding often means avoiding the top contenders until the 3rd round, which can be the difference between an early exit and a deep run. The financial impact is equally real. Prize money distribution at tour events creates cliffs between rounds. A second-round exit in Beijing paid her just over $21,000. Advancing would have meant $36,000. That $15,000 gap represents nearly 3 to 4% of her yearly earnings. For mid-ranked players without large endorsement deals, those margins determine whether they can travel with a coach, afford a physiotherapist, or invest in fitness support. Buses Monero had earned roughly $487,000 across the season, already a personal best. But those incremental boosts matter when climbing the ladder in a sport where expenses eat up a large share of earnings. There's also the psychological toll. Sports psychologists have studied how athletes react when they feel cheated. Players who perceive unfair officiating are more likely to become conservative in crucial moments, afraid to take risks because they doubt fair reward. They play not to lose instead of playing to win. Data shows their success rate on breakpoints drops sharply in the months following such experiences. For Buses Monero, who already relies on consistency more than aggression, that mindset shift could prove damaging if it lingers. Meanwhile, Mira Andreeva faces a different challenge. At just 17, she's already one of the most hyped young talents on the WTA. She owns wins over top 10 players. Her ranking sits in the low 20s, and she's projected to crack the top 20 soon. She's also a magnet for sponsors, media attention, and fans who see her as part of the next wave alongside Coco Gauff and Zheng Qinwen. Beijing should have been another step forward in her ascent. Instead, her win is now clouded by accusations. On her social media, comments have poured in. Supporters hail her composure and execution. Detractors accuse her of benefiting from officiating errors, even suggesting home advantage in China due to Russia's political ties. Conspiracy theories spread faster than corrections. Andreeva herself has said little, sticking to a simple line: "I focus only on my game. I trust the process." Her coach offered one brief statement praising her performance. Beyond that, silence. Silence may be smart in the short term, avoiding fanning the flames, but perception can harden quickly. Sponsors in particular crave clean narratives. If Andreeva becomes associated, even unfairly, with controversial wins, it could hurt her marketability. At 17, she is entering the stage where long-term endorsement deals are negotiated. Companies like Adidas and Wilson want ambassadors who are celebrated without caveats. Any whiff of controversy can cut into contract values or marketing budgets. The WTA's broader situation adds another layer. Over the past decade, the organization has invested heavily in Asia, with China as its centerpiece. Beijing's China Open is one of the richest WTA tournaments, with millions in prize money and broadcast deals. Attendance this year averaged more than 12,000 fans per day, and TV ratings in China peaked at over 8 million viewers. These numbers justify the WTA's expansion strategy, but expansion only works if fans trust the product. If tournaments in Asia gain reputations for questionable officiating, players may hesitate to travel, and fans may discount results as less legitimate. This isn't paranoia. Sports history shows how fragile legitimacy can be. FIFA suffered reputational damage when officiating controversies at World Cups went unchecked. The NFL faced outrage during the 2012 referee lockout when replacement officials botched nationally televised games, forcing the league to settle with its referees in days. Once the audience doubts fairness, the value of the product collapses quickly. That's why the technology question looms so large. Hawkeye has been a step forward, but it's a half measure. It relies on players choosing to challenge, which means many errors go uncorrected. Players only get 3 incorrect challenges per set, so if they burn them early, later errors stand. Independent analysis suggests an average of 3 incorrect calls per match go unchallenged, with nearly 1/5 of those occurring in high-leverage situations like breakpoints. The obvious solution is full electronic line calling. The ATP has adopted it more aggressively than the WTA, rolling it out at multiple tournaments where line judges are no longer used. It eliminates errors entirely and actually speeds up matches, since there are no pauses for challenges. Players overwhelmingly favor it. A recent survey of WTA athletes found more than 75% want electronic line calling at all top-tier events. So why hasn't it happened? Cost and tradition. Full electronic systems cost about $100,000 to $150,000 per court, double the expense of current hybrid setups. Installing it across every WTA 1,500 event would mean tens of millions in new spending. Smaller tournaments might not survive that budget hit. And beyond money, there's culture. Tennis prides itself on tradition. Line judges in their uniforms are part of the sport's identity. Removing them changes the visual language of the game. For purists, it feels sterile, even if it's more accurate. The WTA has so far chosen compromise. Hybrid officiating preserves the human element while offering technological backup. But Beijing showed the flaws of that compromise. Hawkeye corrected 5 calls, but 2 critical moments still went against Bouzas Moniro because of technicalities in the rulebook. For players, that kind of inconsistency feels intolerable when careers are on the line. The Beijing controversy also fits into a long history of officiating flashpoints in women's tennis. Each time the details differ, but the pattern stays the same. A player feels wronged, raises her voice, and the institution responds with boilerplate while protecting its officials. The most famous example came in the 2018 US Open final between Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka. Chair umpire Carlos Ramos issued Williams 3 code violations, including a game penalty that effectively ended the match. The aftermath overshadowed Osaka's first Grand Slam victory. Williams argued that men regularly say worse things to umpires without facing the same punishment. Data later confirmed her point. Men were penalized for verbal abuse and coaching violations at lower rates despite similar behaviors. The WTA promised reforms, yet the rules and enforcement largely stayed the same. Other incidents reveal the same institutional inertia. In 2019 at Indian Wells, Petra Martic challenged a call that Hawkeye showed to be correct, yet the chair umpire replayed the point anyway, misapplying the rule. Martic complained afterward, nearly word for word echoing what Bouzas Moniro would say years later. The technology showed I was right, but the umpire decided the rules didn't apply. The WTA issued its standard statement, launched no public investigation, and the incident faded. This inconsistency reveals a structural problem. Famous players at high-profile events can spark headlines and broader debate. Serena Williams did, Naomi Osaka did, even Alizé Cornet did when she was penalized for briefly changing her shirt on court, while men routinely do so without consequence. Those controversies attracted enough attention to force minor adjustments, but mid-ranked players at smaller stages rarely receive the same validation. Their grievances vanish into the archives of niche fan forums, remembered only by obsessives. Bouzas Moniro sitting at number. 54, lacks the global profile to force reform on her own. That doesn't make her complaints less valid. Her challenge numbers speak for themselves. She was right far more often than the average player, and her protests weren't just emotional, they were grounded in technical details of the rulebook and Hawkeye's margin of error. Still, without fame amplifying her voice, the odds of her getting official vindication are slim. The economics of prize money sharpen the sting. Over the past decade, total WTA prize money has grown from about $118 million in 2014 to over $250 million in 2024. That growth sounds impressive, but distribution remains top-heavy. The elite earn millions, while players ranked between 40 and 70 scrape by. A $15,000 swing in one match might not matter to a top 10 player, but for Bouzas Monero, it represents weeks of travel or coaching support. When officiating errors cost players at this level, the financial hit is not abstract. It directly affects their ability to compete. Her psychological state moving forward also matters. Research in sports psychology shows players who feel cheated often tighten up during crucial points in later matches. They hit fewer winners, attempt fewer risks, and their performance on breakpoints declines. For a player like Bouzas Monero, whose game is built more on consistency than firepower, becoming overly cautious could be disastrous. The risk is that Beijing becomes not just one bad day, but the seed of a slump that derails her momentum. Mira Andreeva faces a different type of fallout. At just 17, she has already established herself as one of the most promising young talents in tennis. Her ranking in the low 20s makes her the second highest teenager on tour behind Coco Gauff. Her social media following rivals players ranked far higher. Her endorsements with Adidas and Wilson position her as a star in waiting. But the Beijing match has clouded her image. Through no fault of her own, her victory now carries an asterisk in the minds of some fans. The comment sections on her posts fill with accusations in multiple languages, ranging from suspicion to outright conspiracy theories about home advantage in China. While those claims lack evidence, perception matters. Sponsors prefer athletes without baggage. Even a faint association with controversy can reduce contract values or marketing support when deals are renegotiated. Andreeva's team has opted for silence, which may be the wisest approach in the short term. Engaging with the controversy risks keeping it alive. Yet silence has limits. Fans and media want answers. If she avoids the subject entirely, she risks being seen as dismissive. If she addresses it, she risks prolonging the conversation. It is a no-win scenario created entirely by circumstances outside her control. For the WTA itself, Beijing highlighted its biggest vulnerability. The organization has poured resources into expanding in Asia, and China is its most valuable market. The China Open is a crown jewel event, generating millions in sponsorships and broadcast deals. In 2024, it drew crowds of nearly 17,000 for the women's final and millions of television viewers. Those numbers justify the WTA's strategy. But perception of unfair officiating could jeopardize that growth. Fans in Asia are sensitive to perceived disrespect, while fans in the West may see controversies at Asian events as proof of lower standards. Either way, the WTA risks losing credibility. Transparency could help, but tennis governance resists it. Chair umpires wear microphones and conversations are recorded. Releasing audio of disputed calls would let fans hear what was said and why decisions were made. If the umpire was correct, transparency would prove it. If not, it would create accountability. Yet the WTA keeps such recordings private, shielding officials from scrutiny. The result is suspicion by default. For Bouzas Monero, the chances of official vindication are slim. Since 2018, the WTA has formally reviewed fewer than 10% of matches where complaints were filed. Of those, only one resulted in public acknowledgement of error. If history holds, Beijing will quietly fade, with no findings announced. Bouzas Monero may even face a fine under conduct rules for implying impropriety. Those fines can reach $20,000, a devastating sum for a player at her level. Such punishment would also send a chilling message to others: don't speak out. This chilling effect already seems to be in play. Reports suggest several players privately sympathized with Bouzas Monero but refused to back her publicly. They feared financial penalties or reputational harm. That leaves individuals isolated while the institution protects itself. The result is a culture where officiating errors are tolerated, players absorb the cost, and little changes. At the same time, the economic modeling shows how costly one loss can be. If Busas Monero had advanced past Andreeva, she would have gained not only 120 points, but also stronger seeding in future events. Seeded players advance an average of nearly one round further at WTA 500 events compared to unseeded peers. Over the rest of the season, that advantage could have meant $30,000 more in earnings. Instead, she leaves Beijing with a smaller paycheck and tougher draws ahead. For Andreeva, the short-term impact is less financial and more reputational. She advanced to the quarterfinals in Beijing, earning over $79,000 and 215 ranking points. By any measure, it was a success. But at every press conference she gave afterward, questions about Busas Monero overshadowed her results. When a teenager on the cusp of stardom finds her legitimacy questioned, it can linger unfairly in her story. The deeper issue raised by Beijing is whether tennis can keep tolerating preventable mistakes. The sport already has the technology to eliminate human error in line calling. Full electronic line calling, used widely on the ATP Tour, has proven reliable and fast. It removes disputes, ensures fairness, and even speeds up play. Players overwhelmingly support it. The only obstacles are cost, tradition, and institutional inertia. The numbers show the expense is not prohibitive. Installing electronic line calling on a court costs around $100,000 to $150,000. For a WTA 1000 event with 3 or 4 show courts, that totals a few $100,000, less than 5% of total tournament budgets. The WTA as a whole generates hundreds of millions annually in prize money and sponsorships. The financial resources exist. The question is not whether it can be done, but whether the will exists to do it. Tradition remains the bigger barrier. Line judges in their crisp uniforms have been part of tennis for more than a century. They appear in every iconic photo, every documentary montage, every memory of legendary matches. Removing them would change the sport's visual identity. For purists, that loss feels heavier than the gain in accuracy. But younger fans, raised on instant replay in every sport from football to basketball, have little patience for human error when technology can prevent it. The WTA is stuck between two worlds, one clinging to heritage, the other demanding modernization. Beijing exposed how dangerous that halfway position can be. Hawkeye corrected some errors, but not all. The rules allowed a chair umpire to override replay evidence, and the opacity of review processes created suspicion. It's the worst of both systems, human mistakes highlighted by technology, but not always corrected. From the player's perspective, the consequences are painfully one-sided. When a line judge errs, the player loses ranking points, prize money, and momentum. The official faces no public consequences. At worst, they receive private feedback. When a player speaks out, as Busas Monero did, they risk fines and reputational harm. The imbalance is stark. The system shields officials and punishes players for demanding accountability. That imbalance corrodes trust. Athletes need to believe that performance determines results, not officiating quirks. When that belief falters, motivation suffers. Research shows that athletes who perceive the system as unfair are more likely to withdraw, retire early, or underperform in pressure moments. Busas Monero is unlikely to quit, but the risk of her confidence eroding is real. Andreeva, conversely, is caught in the opposite trap. She played well and deserved her win, yet her legitimacy is questioned. She cannot prove she did not benefit from bias. Proving a negative is impossible. All she can do is keep winning and hope future success overshadows this controversy. For a teenager still building her reputation, that is an unfair burden to carry. For the WTA, the Beijing incident underscores a larger truth. Growth and legitimacy cannot be separated. The tour has expanded into Asia, boosted prize money, and secured valuable broadcast deals. But if players and fans perceive different standards in different regions, that growth becomes fragile. A two-tier system where Grand Slam results are seen as trustworthy, but WTA 1000 events are viewed with skepticism, would undermine the entire structure. Transparency is the easiest first step. The WTA already records umpire audio. Publishing those conversations after disputed matches would allow the public to judge whether rules were applied correctly. Other sports have adopted similar practices. The Premier League now releases VAR discussions. Fans may still disagree with calls, but at least they understand the reasoning. Tennis could do the same at little cost, yet so far it has chosen opacity. The next step must be full electronic line calling at every WTA 1000 event. The ATP has shown it can be done, and as technology becomes cheaper, cost will no longer be an excuse. The only question is whether the WTA makes the move proactively or waits for another controversy, likely in a Grand Slam or involving a superstar, that forces reform. Bouzas-Monero's match won't be the trigger, but it adds to the growing weight of evidence. In the end, the Beijing controversy will probably fade from headlines. The official record will forever show Mira Andreeva defeating Jessica Bouzas-Monero 6-4, 7-5. Andreeva collected the ranking points and prize money. Bouzas-Monero left with less. The WTA moved on with its template response. Yet the unofficial record, the one written in memory, perception, and online debate, is far more complicated. Bouzas-Monero will be remembered by some as the player who dared accuse the system of failure. Andreeva will be remembered by others as the teenager whose win came with an asterisk. And the WTA will be remembered as the institution that again chose silence over accountability. What makes the situation frustrating is that it didn't need to happen. Technology exists to prevent these controversies. Resources exist to fund it. Player support exists to demand it. The only thing missing is institutional will. Until that changes, the sport will continue to create losers not just through competition, but through preventable errors. Players will keep feeling robbed, players will keep having victories questioned, and fans will keep wondering why tennis insists on being good enough when perfection is within reach. The two central questions remain. If the technology to eliminate errors exists, do tennis authorities have an obligation to use it everywhere? And when players raise officiating concerns supported by evidence, does the WTA owe them transparent review and accountability? How the sport answers those questions will shape whether incidents like Beijing are footnotes or turning points. For now, Jessica Bouzas-Monero pays the price of speaking up. Mira Andreeva carries the burden of a win clouded by doubt. And the WTA continues to walk the uneasy line between tradition and fairness, hoping the storm passes without demanding the change that everyone knows is coming.